theyeshiva.net.
Somebody brought props. Thank you for the props. They're very meaningful.
Use it well.
I will. Be'ezer Hashem. So you see how easy this is to melt, right? This is called a koiret of Sheleg. Yeah, little snowflake, and it's already melted. It's shavasa. Shavasa. It's already my mayim achronim or mayim rishonim on the tilas yadayim. This guy, right, is although there's the external parts that melt a little bit, but it's a chefza, as he puts it, av kasha, especially when you get to icebergs. And he said sometimes you have kerach that's kama amos, the thickness is many feet, and it's so heavy, it's so strong, it's so powerful that people walked over rivers, as they still do in Russia and other places where they freeze, Canada, and as he put it, they would take wagons over rivers with heavy, heavy burdens. And even if it wasn't so thick, but it was so dense, it was tough, it could carry extremely heavy burden on top of the river, even though when spring would come and summer would come and the ice would melt, it would be impossible to do that, obviously. And, anybody who would attempt doing that, obviously, could drown Khalil, and in fact it was always risky, at the end of the winter, the beginning of spring, because people would go out with their horses or take a walk or whatever, go skiing, and if they didn't realize that something was melting, it could be very dangerous. Okay, so let's now continue inside, and then of course water. We know what water is. Water lechatchila you can't walk on, as it's completely a liquid form. It doesn't have that solid form, which is captured in snow, or in sleet, in hail, or in what we would call kerach, ice. So let's learn further inside. It's in the Maamer, page 126, the second column. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 lines from the top. If you weren't here at the first shir, which was 2 days ago, Monday, it's kedai to chazer it, so you just follow it inside, because Tanya describes vividly and physically the difference between the water and the snow and the ice in a very illustrative fashion. Ume'ata yesh lahavin. Ume'ata yesh lahavin behefresh asher ben sheleg lekerach k'moshe nizboy. Now it's important to understand the difference between snow and ice, which we pointed out above in terms of the physical properties, external properties. Ki b'chinas hasheleg hu rak tzimtzum koten be'erech tzimtzum hakerach. The condensing element or the contracting element. Now, when I say contracting and condensing, I don't mean here in the sense that the water becomes smaller, because on the contrary, ice expands the water. But the point here is in terms of from a liquid state to a solid state, which means it becomes compact, it becomes condensed in that sense. We're calling it a tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means contraction or restriction, because it's restricted now. It's rigid. It's in one solid place. It's a solid. It's not a liquid. So he says that tzimtzum, the element of condensing or contracting in Sheleg is cotton. It's much smaller relative to the ice. Al pi hamavur l'mayla b'inyan hakerach. Based on what we explained above about ice, shu inyan hagilud ha'av v'kasha. The congealing of it, the ice, is thick and it's hard. Shu ba mitzad oitzem hakivutz hagadol. Kivutz means verquetschtkeit. In English, you would say verquetschtkeit is
Contraction.
I guess, compact, contract, condensed. Yeah, that's the concept of kivutz.
Kibbutz is not more of a gathering?
That's kibbutz. This is kivutz. Chaf yud, not kuf yud, and vav vav tzadik, not vez vav tzadik. Yeah. It could be it's connected. V'kaptzeinu yachat. Yeah. But it's a different word. Kivutz, lechavetz, it's verquetscht. Collapse. Okay, well, the word kivutz. Collapse, the same concept. The previous state collapses, so to speak, into a different state. It collapses into itself, yeah. The previous state of Mayim collapses into itself, where it becomes just one solid piece of ice, but in a lesser form, snow. So they both have the common denominator, that the water is not any more liquid. And it's as a result of water hitting the freezing, what's called the freezing state, right? The temperature, that below that temperature, there's what we call water becoming frozen. And that's a certain particular temperature that the water has to encounter to be able to be impacted this way. So essentially, that's the common denominator. The water became frozen. That's what happened. Now, obviously, the mechanisms are somewhat different. When you're dealing with snow, what you have is ice crystals that are being formed in clouds. Now, clouds, as we will see, are made up of, as we know today, billions and billions of microscopic droplets of water. That's what they're made up of. Billions and billions of droplets of water. Trillions, billions, trillions of droplets of water. When the temperature up there in the clouds hits below freezing point, below the point of being frozen, so these droplets of water turn into ice crystals. But it's not just water. Snowflakes will only happen when the ice crystals are attracted to a particle of dust or soot that's in the cloud, and the cloud has particles of dust of earth, and around that dust, the droplets of water will form what's called today, what we call an ice crystal. And many ice crystals together will form what we call a snowflake. And it simply becomes too heavy for the cloud to contain. And since it becomes too heavy, it leaves the cloud and it descends as snowflakes. And when we see these beautiful white angels coming down in such a gentle fashion and it falls on your hand, it's a very exhilarating feeling. So on one level, you could just see it as a very mechanical and technical, mazel that happens to be the water droplets in the cloud found a particle of dust, and it was below freezing point, so it became an ice crystal that gathered on the particle of dust. You have enough ice crystals together, you have a snowflake, and they come down because it's too heavy, and therefore they come down through the atmosphere until they reach Earth. Now here you have a very interesting thing. Very often it snows up there, but not down here. And the reason is because when the snowflake hits our temperature, it doesn't have that same level of coldness. Right? It's above the freezing point. So now what happens is the snowflake turns into water, which is why down here it's rain, even though it starts as snow up there. On the other hand, in a weather like we had this week, the temperature down here matches the temperature up there, or at least in the sense that it's below the freezing point, whether more or less or equal. And as a result of that, it retains the property of snow all the way till it hits the earth. Although when it hits the earth, if it's just one snowflake, as he says, or you put it in a keli, it's going to melt extremely easily, and it's going to revert back to the water. So that's all in terms of Sheleg. That's what Sheleg is basically. Gewalt trinken das. Which you could, right? You could turn it into Mayim, yeah. We'll soon see. Later in the Maamer, how all of this is going to be manifested in halacha and the halachas of mikveh and washing hands, in terms of how we look at snow when it comes to a mikveh, when it comes to netilas yadayim, how we look at ice when it comes to mikveh and netilas yadayim. It's one of, like in everything, the sugyas, how they match in nigla and in halacha and in nister and in science is is, I believe, as spectacular as snowflakes and even beyond. So that's the concept of the Sheleg. Sometimes you have an interesting thing, which we call sleet. What's sleet? It's very fascinating. It starts as snow, but when it leaves the clouds, as a result of the climate changing, and the temperature is above freezing point, so it reverts back into water. But when it becomes lower down, the temperature again is freezing point, but it doesn't have enough time. It doesn't have enough time, mamish, to go into a state of snow again. So as a result of that, it's sleet. It becomes like icy, so to speak, because it goes into that state. But it doesn't remain snow. I mean, it didn't remain snow a whole time. It reverted back to water, and then it becomes sleet. So these are all different manifestations. Then you have what we call ice. Ice doesn't happen in the clouds. Ice happens everywhere. It can happen in your house. It can happen in a lake. It can happen on any surface. It can happen on the ground. And ice, as he said, can really build up and become extremely, extremely hard and extremely thick and extremely terse and extremely dense and extremely powerful, to the point that they'll have all these spectacular feats of power. You ever see where people punch in a block of ice that's a few feet, to some agaton, in your martial arts? They punch it with their fist. It's quite a feat to be able to penetrate all that ice. So what does this all mean when we speak about the nimshal? We speak about the mashlan versus the nimshal. So he says that the tzimtzum of the mayim in kerach is, as he puts it, is a much greater one.
If it's not too cold on top, then it would be regular rain.
Yeah, that's why it rains. And the shape of the snowflakes, all of its properties are based on the temperature of it. And in snow itself, you'll have the fluffy type of snow, and you'll have, the fluffy snow that sticks together, and then you have the powder snow that's more like powder. It remains separate, right? It's good for skiing. So you'll have all these different types of snow that's based on the different temperatures. Yeah. So as he said before, in 126 in the first column, that the sheleg, even though it changes from the water, it's easily reverted back to water. Where kerach is a gilud av v'gas. Av is thick, very thick, and gas is, here it's not so coarse, but it's fierce, it's stark, it's dense, it's very, very, very thick, to the point that it could be kama amos very easily. It could be many feet. It could be the thickness. You're not going to have that in snowflakes. It's just simply impossible. Physically, it's impossible. A much lighter weight is already going to leave the cloud. That's why it leaves the cloud. It doesn't stay in the cloud. It's too heavy for it. So it's very, very subtle. It's very, very thin. It's almost easily changed back to water. Not almost, very easily. Where kedach is not so simple. It could melt, but it's a process. It takes time. It takes a lot of heat. It takes a heavy process to revert it. And he says, even if the kerach is thin, he says it's as thin as the finger. Nonetheless, a layer of ice is so powerful. It's so congealed. That's what he means by the tzimtzum. It's so condensed. It's so compacted. It's so collapsed into itself that it becomes a cheftza. It becomes a real object on which you can travel, as he put it. You can travel with your horse and your wagon, your 8 horses, and your coach and your wagon, and put on it many, many burdens and suitcases, and you're completely good. It's mamish like the earth. Just like the earth doesn't pose a danger, on the contrary, the earth is made to carry you. That's what the kerach is, even if it's not so thick. It's pretty thin. But that thin layer, as long as it's not melting, it's a thin layer. It's extremely, extremely. It's not easily breachable, and therefore it could carry you. Yeah. So he says this mashal in Gashmias is representing 2 ways in which the mayim, which we said mayim is what? Mayim is chachma. Ein mayim elatayr. Mayim is the divine wisdom that flows. And where does it flow? As the Gemara says, Mimakam gavaya lamakam namach. It flows from the higher realms into the lower realms, all the way down to this realm. As he put it, All the Chachma in this world ultimately is rooted in divine Chachma. Every Chachma. And when he spoke about the Chachma, we spoke about Nituach, the Chachma of biology, the Chachma of anatomy of a person, as the example he gave, which is a gewaldige Chachma. It's dazzling, it's brilliant, it's extraordinary. To understand the way the body works, the way the human organism, or any organism really works, the way any organism works. He gave the mashal of a human being. That's called a Chachma Gashmis. Why is it called a Chachma Gashmis? Because the whole Chachma relates to physical properties. When you're studying in medical school, the most important props are skeletons. MS, skeletons. That's what you're looking at. It's tangible, it's concrete, it's real, very much in the physical sense, and that's what you're studying. You're studying the chemistry, the makeup, the composition, the nature, the relationship, the interactions between all of the avrim, between all of the limbs and all of the organs of the human body. So he says that's an example of the mayim that came down, all the way down, till this world. But it required a tremendous amount of tzimtzum to be able to metamorphosize. Metamorphosize means to be able to go through the change, right? Go through the change. You know, we have the caterpillar. Word metamorphosis originally, I think, applies to from the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. So over there, the caterpillar, which is terrestrial, which is earthbound, suddenly becomes heavenly. It metamorphosizes from Eretz to Shemayim. Now it becomes a butterfly. But you have the opposite metamorphosis. That for Chachma to be able to come down, it must be condensed, it must be compacted, it must collapse, it must be contracted. That's the concept of the Mayim turning into Sheleg, and then the Sheleg going back into Mayim, which means it gets into Sheleg to be able to be transported. It's got to go through a metamorphosis, but then it reverts back to water, where it becomes a whole science, a whole wisdom, a whole Chachma. In other words, it's Mayim. But here, there's a difference between Sheleg and Kerach in the intensity of this process of tzimtzum. So he says, Kach yesh l'mayla b'bchinas tzimtzum b'bitl. The same is true when we speak in the Nimshul about tzimtzum, about contraction, about condensing, or bitl, the collapsing into itself, k'may mashal, the aidi, the tarid lemivla. Back to the mashal we spoke in halach, that when something is absorbed, when something is busy absorbing, it will not emit. The art of receiving is not the same art as giving, as transmitting, as sending. As somebody told me yesterday, on the computer, by the email, there's two separate buttons. There's receive and open, and then there's send. It's two different experiences. One of Zainam Mishalim. So here you have the concept of Ayyid Tarid Lemivla. When I'm busy reading, when I'm busy absorbing, Loi Polit, I'm not emitting, and as we explained yesterday, it's two completely different states in reality. Even though in today's world, we're all multitasking, and you're receiving, and you're giving, and you're writing, and you're thinking, and you're planning, and you're building, huh?
Send, receive, one button.
In one button, everything is the same.
That's how many processors.
Yeah, that's true. Says, "Can my mashal the tarid lemivla kanal shehu batal kol kach." In terms of the makabel, it means that he's so nullified. In other words, he suspends himself so much. Shehu ba b'bchinas oitzim v'toikef kol kach achis alim legamri kol b'chinas hachachma. It is so intense. The condensement, the contraction is so intense that his entire chachma, so to speak, suspended and concealed. The ruach tzafen aglid maya, the northern winds, the northern climates, what we call today the North Pole, aglid maya, it freezes and congeals the water. You go to Antarctica, and there, ice. That's the common reality. That's what you have to be used to. The Eskimos, right, in those regions, Alaska and so forth.
Whose symptom is he?
This is their dita.
Whose symptom is he referring to at this moment?
The Makabel. Pirush b'chinas hagvura detzofen. This represents the gvura of tzofen, the quality of gvura of strength, which gvura is also contraction. Shohu kedimyan avir hakar. Gvura in physicality is represented by the cold avir, by the cold temperature, the freezing climate, hamakarer, which cools, umaglid and freezes hamayim, ulufi toikef hakar kach toikef haglad, or hagilud. And based on the intensity of the temperature, in other words, based on, it could be below zero, it could be 40 below zero, or it could be like in Chicago a few weeks ago, or in Siberia, 30 below zero, 40 below zero, and in some places you have 70 below zero. And people live there, or the polar bears live there. So because there's much more kor, which creates a much swifter and more powerful ice, and of course much larger sheets, much larger quantities. We have sometimes icebergs and mountains and mountains and mountains of ice.
I understand though, it says kakesh lamala b'chinas tzitzim, but lamala is, the Kodesh Baruch Hu is not the mekabel though.
No, Lamaila means in the Nimshal. Lamaila, he doesn't mean by the Mashpia. Lamaila just means versus Lamata. Lamata is physical, and Lamaila we mean the concept spiritually. That's what he means, Lamaila. Lamaila means from a higher perspective, a deeper perspective. Ulahavin calls Ebetois's beer to understand all this more. Hine Yuvan de Gmasi Mashamatzinu b'Moshe. We find by Moshe Shayekvat Per Kvat Losh. Hashem wants to send him to Mitzrayim, and Moshe keeps on saying, Kvat per, kvat lashon anochi. Literally, it means have a heavy mouth and a heavy tongue. It's hard for me to speak. V'yadua hatam. The reason for this is known. On one level, the Medrash speaks about how Moshe's tongue was burnt when he was a young boy, and it developed into a speech impediment. Yeah. Different Mefarshim explain Kvat Peh, Kvat Losh in different ways. Yeah. Some say that Moshe simply felt he doesn't have communication skills. It was very hard for him to speak. Or it was a physical impediment. But just as we're talking about snow and ice, that every physical property is a result of an internal experience. So here we discuss it not al pi pshat, al pi nigla, in a revealed way. Moshe has a hard time talking, which obviously, the Gemara says, Ein mikra yotzeh b'dei pshuta. But there's something behind that. There's the neshama of it. What is it? So he says something unbelievable. Mipnei shahaya by habitl b'tachlas. Moshe couldn't speak because his state of bitl, of oneness, of alignment, was ultimate. K'moshe kasav, as he says, when the Jewish people are complaining, he says this twice in Parshas B'Shalach, v'nachnu ma. It's a very interesting expression. What are we? Kisalinu aleinu. You're attacking us. V'nachnu, we, anachnu, ma. What are we? What does Moshe mean? What does it mean, what are we? Again, al pi pshat, it means we're not dictators here. We're not trying to control you guys. We're just following the orders. V'nachnu ma. It's like lahavli, somebody says, I just work here, I don't make the rules. What do you want from me? Like Moshe said, v'nachnu ma, what do you think? I'm trying to control you. I'm trying to manipulate the situation. You think I have water somewhere stuck in my freezer and I don't want to give it to you? I have food somewhere that I'm taking away from you. V'nachnu, you're attacking us. What are we? He says what Moshe is saying is something much deeper. Shehu b'chinas ma'aseh b'chachma. It's what we call the state of ma, of chachma, which is two words, koyach ma. Chachma is ches, chaf, memhei, which is a combination of the words koyach ma, the koyach, the faculty of ma, of what? Of saying what? What does this mean? Generally, the concept of chachma, the idea of chachma is koyach ma, the ability to say ma. What is the ability to say ma? On the most basic level, it's curiosity, inquisitiveness, the ability to really ask a question, ma. It comes back to what we discussed in the previous year, the ability to be able to wonder. Where do you see this most? You see it by children. Children's sense of wonder is completely intact. They wonder. And it's a wonderful thing. Adults are usually so busy and occupied, they don't listen to their questions. But really, children, we all have it innately. It's the question the human being says, ma, what? What? I was walking one Shabbos with one of my little boys to Shul a few years ago. So he looks at me, he says, Tati, why is cement always gray? I don't know, I never thought of it. I probably also asked somebody when I was 4 years old, and I was said, oh, stupid question. So you stop asking, right? Then, of course, why is the sky blue? Why are trees always green? Why do they never change their color? Why are trunks always brown? Okay, now these are good questions. These are very good questions. And then it's like, look, there's red on the floor because there was a red string. So now for 10 minutes we had to analyze the red string. Now we're usually so busy getting somewhere. Who has time to live? You're busy making a living. But life really begins with the ma, the koyach ma, the power to ask what. It represents something even deeper. It's the humility. Humility is based on koyach ma. What's koyach ma? Koyach ma means ich weiß nicht, I don't know. In other words, I don't want to just filter everything through my brain. I want to open myself up to find out what is it, not based on my preconceived notions and my preconceived bias. The greatest contradiction to real growth is, as we said many times, and we spoke about it yesterday at length, is when there's no koyach ma, when I know everything, I can't hear anything new. And I don't even have that ability, because even if I'll hear something new, it's not going to be new. I'm just going to put it into the previous files. So as a result of that, all of Chachma really represents that openness. And Chachma is the epiphany of wisdom. Bina is the development. Chachma is, as his mashal is Abba, the father. It's the tipa. It's the seed of life that spurts out, which is the basics, which is the essence of the fetus, and then the mother takes it and develops it. That's like Bina. Chachma is Abba, and Bina is Ima, the mother. But when you speak about Chachma, therefore, it's like the epiphany of wisdom. It's like you have an epiphany, you have an inspiration, like a lightening. It's called a lightening. What does that come from? Where did it come from? It always is, the prerequisite of Chachma is always bittul. You created an empty space of ma to be able to absorb new information. That's what all Chachma is. So the Moshe Rabbeinu says, V'nachnu ma. His mitzias, his whole mitzias is a mitzias of bittul. His mitzias is a mitzias of ma. Because of Moshe's essential bittul that was so profound, he could not be in a mode of ispashtus, of expression, of projection, to be able to articulate himself through words in his mouth. The Talmud who sits in front of his Rebbe ultimately leaves the Shir. And when he leaves the Shir, now the Talmud himself becomes a Rebbe to other Talmidim. But what happens if you never leave? What happens if you're always sitting there? He doesn't speak. That's Moshe. Moshe never leaves. He's always sitting in the presence of infinity. And therefore he can never open his mouth. Any form of opening his mouth feels like so inappropriate.
Except that Shem made him leave. He made him
of course. But that was the friction. That was the dialogue. Lo yish dvarim kvat peh. And Hashem keeps on saying, who made people speak? And it's a pella. Moshe didn't know this. Every Jewish kid knows that speech is a gift that comes from God. But Hashem is like arguing with him. Let me teach you the basics of Aleph Beis. Basics of Aleph Beis is, I'm God and I created speech and I'm telling you to go. Hashem says, Mi sam pella adam. Who gave people a mouth? Who made people? Who gave people the ability to speak? And I'm telling you to go. What are you arguing with God that you could speak? You can speak. He doesn't know about speech. He's the author of speech. But the truth is, Moshe knew that Hashem created speech. Moshe was saying something very, very deep. Moshe was saying something that kvad pel, kvad loshen anoichi. It's not just that I don't think. If you want me to speak, I'll speak. A stick could become a snake. A stick could become a snake. Yeah, a matter could become a nachash, and all the moifsim and the water could become blood. Moshe Rabbeinu will speak if Hashem wants him to speak. L'poila wasn't so simple. He brought Adon with him. He sent Adon with him. His speech impediment wasn't completely healed in Mitzrayim.
When did Moshe going to say
later, after Yitzias Mitzrayim? There's a few times he tells the Jewish people that expression. B'shalach. B'shalach by Korach.
Korach is ice.
Yes. Yes, we'll see. It's not a joke. Korach is ice, yeah.
Moshe Rabbeinu bittled himself in front of that ice.
And Moshe is called Moshe, Kimin Hamayim Mishisihu, because he was drawn out of water. So just because he was drawn out of water, therefore his name is Moshe? What does it have to do? He was drawn out of water. It's a beautiful event. He was taken from water. He was in a casket in water, and if nobody would have taken him, he wouldn't be able to survive there. Simply, he wouldn't have, he had oxygen, but he wouldn't have food or milk. The daughter of Pari drew him from the water, and she named him Moshe, which means drawn out of water. But that became his name. If that became his name, it means that captures the essence of Moshe. The Medrash says in Vayikra, Moshe had 10 names, Jewish names. His father gave him, his mother gave him, when he was born. The name that the daughter of Pari gave him was a long time after his birth. It was not less than 3 months because she retrieved him 3 months. So it was a name that he got not by his bris, not by his birth. He got it much, much later in his life, and yet that became his permanent name. It's really a nickname. But we don't even know. Most people don't even know that Moshe had a name Tuvia, or Moshe had a name Yekusiel, or Moshe had a name Chaver. These are names people don't know. These are his parents' names. The Medrash Vayikra goes through all the names. He had 10 names. Vatera Iseki Toivu, Toiv. So as a result of this, it means that Moshe is connected very much to water, very much to Maya. So we'll soon see the Nekudah here. But the Nekudah, the point of Balatanya is saying now is Kvad Pel, Kvad Loshen. He's always sitting at that shear. And a shear from whom? He's sitting, so to speak, at the Rebbeinu Shalom shear, a Kenish Efen in the Moil. It's not that he doesn't want to speak, he's shy of people, he doesn't want, he's afraid he's going to make mistakes, he's going to be judged. He can't open, Kvad Pel, Kvad Loshen. So geht nicht. In that state, so lost sich nicht Efen in the Moil. He can't open his mouth. Because it's a complete state of bittul, a complete state of awe, of reverence. His eye is not present. He's sitting like, when you're sitting with your mouth open, so to speak, mesmerized, consumed, subsumed in the presence of what he's receiving. He's not in a state of becoming a projector, a teacher, a mentor, which is the exact opposite state. Now you become from a makabel, you go into a state of assertion. You have to be organized. You have to think it through. You're communicating. Now you're in the leading role. You're not the makabel. If you're completely in a state of bittul, if I am not present and I open my mouth, you know what it's going to look like. Nothing is going to come out. So Moshe essentially is in a state of silence, not because he has nothing to say, but because he has too much to say. Because what he's receiving is so much more than what he could give. So therefore he's in a state of silence. That's for him the most natural state. And when the Rebbeinu Shalom pushes him and says, you're going to go, that's a tremendous chiddush, it's a tremendous transformation. It's a tremendous transformation in his character.
Why does it seem easier when two people are, say, having an argument? It's easier for them to, this one talks, this one talks, this one talks, this one talks, back and forth, they just keep getting, rather than bittul. Why is it harder to bittul than
Figure that out as a movie.
that's the challenge Hashem gave us. But
Why is it easier?
it seems like something.
Why is it easier to speak than to listen?
No, forget. Why is it when two people get in an argument, they just, this one talk. It's hard for them to bittul.
Well, bittul is very hard. Bittul is very deep. First of all, it takes a lot of confidence, bittul. To be bottle, you have to have a lot of confidence. Yeah. And the process of bittul is one that it's a person who doesn't want to win. He's looking for truth. He's not looking to win. If you're looking to win, it's a whole different experience. Do we want to win the argument, or we don't want to? If I have to win the argument, then it doesn't lend itself to bittul. So when somebody is in that state of sitting at the feet of a giant, right? And somebody will say, don't you want to speak? I said, no, I don't want to speak. I want to stay here forever. I don't want to speak. Speaking means I'm going to detach and become a whole Metzias. I don't want to become a Metzias because me becoming a Metzias means I lose my real Metzias. Bittul is a much more real Metzias. Bittul is I'm allowing myself to be a conduit. That's where I want to be. I don't want to be anywhere else. That the Baal Shem Tov told his students that he did a sin and he was punished. They told him from heaven that he's punished. What's the punishment? Punishment is that he has to reveal himself to the world. That's the punishment. Now go tell this to many Rebbes today. He'll have Mesiras Nefesh to reveal himself to the world. Verstehst? Jene Rebbe. There's a difference of sitting at the feet of somebody that he considers it a punishment, that he has to, that somebody knows him. We're speaking about skepticism and trust. It's a different type of trust. And you can't fake this. Moshe really didn't want to go. Moshe did not need this job. Now, I'm not, don't take this, people have Chiyas HaMesim when I start saying this. I'm not even judging anybody. This is a human trait, yeah? I speak myself a lot. I know about speaking a little bit. And it brings out great things in people. But for the Baal Shem Tov said he was punished. What was the punishment? The punishment is that 300 years later we could sit here today and mention the Baal Shem Tov. So we thank God that the Baal Shem Tov was punished, if I could say that. But for the Baal Shem Tov it was a punishment, like for Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Baal Shem Tov, one of the most famous Jews who ever lived. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, most famous human being in history. What do you want to remain in a desert with a bunch of sheep of your father-in-law? Your whole life you're going to eat naden by Yishrei Yisroi and whatever he says you do, and you're going to have a couple of sheep, and that's what you're going to do your whole life. That's how you're going to live. That's how you're going to pass on. What happens to you? Don't you want to leave? Huh?
They didn't know that it's going to turn.
Exactly.
They would have known. They would have.
No, but even Hashem offers him. Come, redeem the Jew. In all commencement speeches, you got to leave your mark in this world. You got to do something. Don't just sit at home and live in anonymity. But the truth is, that's the nekuda. For some people, his galos, that's where their metzias begins. And it's a very weak metzias. It's a very poor metzias. By Moshe, it's the exact opposite. The more he reveals himself, the less you have from him. And that's what he knows. In other words, there's much deeper that can't come out than what comes out. So when something comes out, is what they hear. They once said in the Shia, Moshe says, Lo yish dvarim anochi, I'm not a man of words. I don't speak. And then there's a sefer called Sefer Dvarim. Eila hadvarim asher diber Moshe. For a man who said, I'm not a man of words, he did pretty well for himself when it came to words. In fact, all the words of the Jewish people and of Judaism is all basically a commentary on Moshe's speeches, aren't they? There's nothing in Judaism that is not an expansion of Moshe's Dvarim. Nothing. Kol masha talmud vasik asad lechadash hakol nitla. But lo yish Dvarim anochi. That's the point. That's why those Dvarim are infinite. That's why they can go on for infinity. But that's the nekuda. And that's why Hashem Taka sent him. So that's the kvad peh, kvad loshen. What? The moment I go into a state of gilui, I'm actually detaching. Why should I go there? It's so geschmack here. They say about one of the chassidim of the Balatanya that he was davening, and he was sitting on a page in Psukkah de Zimra, and he's sitting in a daven, and he's singing, and he's having his baininus. So somebody later came to him and said, what, in davening, you got to turn pages, you got to move on. He says, it was so geschmack here. Why do I have to leave? Where do I have to go? I just wanted to stay here. That's what the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan Levaishi Yispalal Adam Kol Hayom Kulei. What do I have to leave? Where am I going? That other people should know my name. For what? So the truth is that Moshe Rabbeinu had a mission to do. He had a mission to do. And that mission requires sacrifice. It required suspension, not of his material comfort, of his spirituality. The Mesiris Nefesh of a real Manhig Yisrael like Moshe is not begashmius. That's very little. It's not that he won't have time and he won't be able to go on vacation and he won't have a life for himself. That's the smaller Mesiris Nefesh. The bigger Mesiris Nefesh of a real leader is Aruchni is the Mesiris Nefesh. He gives up on his dveikus. That's much deeper. Why? Because he's in a different mode. He's now the leader. What's wrong? What do you mean? You're the leader. For him, being a leader is the greatest tzimtzum in the world. To be a leader is the greatest self-negation. What everybody is so enamored, for you is a form of death. What do I don't mean death literally, I mean death of your core relationship. Kvat peh, kvat lashon anochi. I don't want to speak. I'm in a much more organic space.
Isaac is reminding me that the idea that I think that he was reminding me that you had by the Meraglim didn't want to go to Eretz Yisrael because it was giving as I get.
Yeah. The Meraglim, the Chidush Harim says a lashon, gonna be a Edom of Kest. You know, a son-in-law by his father-in-law, he doesn't want to leave. Papa's paying the bills. What do you got to go for? The Meraglim were in the Midbar. Papa was paying all the bills. Yeah, PhD. Papa has dough or man, PHM, and then Papa is giving the man. What do you have to go into Eretz Yisrael for? You have to make an army and a government and Sheishanim Tizra Sadecha, Sheishanim Tizra Kamecha. Yeah. In other words, the point is the Meraglim had to be crazy to go into Eretz Yisrael. You're protected by clouds of glory. You have Moshe as a teacher. Moshe as a teacher. Where are you going to get you're going to get a yeshiva like this in Eretz Yisrael? Where are you going to go? You have Moshe as a teacher, day in, day out. You're eating God's man for breakfast and dinner. You're drinking water from Be'er Shel Miriam. You got to be crazy to want to leave this. We call it a sin. We call it a sin because Hashem wants them to go into Eretz Yisrael. And life is not always about what's spiritually comfortable, because the soul is much more comfortable in heaven. It also came down. But it explains to us that the Meraglim were not just grotesque rabble-rousers who were just rebels against Moshe and Hashem. They made a mistake. They made a colossal mistake. But it came from a very... they missed the target, but because they were looking for a genuine target. So Moshe says, "I'm kvat peh kvat lashon." What is it? It's the bittul. It's tachlis habittul. He's always at the shir. He's always sitting at the feet of the ultimate Rebbe. And it's not he doesn't want to. He can't. It's his mouth doesn't open. He's glued. He's consumed. He's mesmerized. He's not present. His eye is not present. His eye is in a complete state of bittul.
Moshe Rabbeinu could have stayed in the desert. The Baal Shem Tov could have stayed in the forest. The Alter Rebbe could have stayed in his house, and they could have, each one had an incredible relationship with Hashem, but they were all told to go out and serve the people.
Yeah. And all of them didn't want to. That's the common denominator. Tremendous resistance.
They all knew ultimately that was the right thing to do.
They did it.
The paradox, because if they would have wanted to, God would never designate.
Exactly.
That's the whole point.
Exactly. And if they would want to, the level of truth that they would give would be a completely different level of truth. If I'm sharing because I want to impress the crowd, how much can I share already? What level of truth can I share? If a person gets up to speak and his real agenda is, I need the crowd to love me, how deep, how much truth can I give the people? I'm basically giving them less truth than they themselves even have, because I'm actually just trying to feed into... like looking at the polls.
That's America.
Well, some people in America. I don't know if everybody in America. It's hard for us to understand because we had a mayor who spent once, I think, $100 million for his campaign to be reelected.
It's the speaker's perspective what they're gonna allow.
Yeah. In other words, when you don't need the validation of the crowd, then you have something to say. If all you need is the validation of the crowd, then there's nothing to say. What are you going to tell me? You're going to tell me what I want to hear? I have myself for that. I have my own ego. I need your ego. I have my eigen ego. That's the kvat peh kvat lashon. I did the tarid lemivla loy polit.
So he would never speak. He would never become Rabbi. He would remain Moshe.
That's true. He would remain in the water. He would remain in the water. Kamayim layam mechasam alma diskas. He would remain in the water. And the chiddush is he did remain. Even when he spoke, he wasn't. That's the point. He remained kvat peh kvat lashon. It's not something that he left. It's who he was. That's why he looks at them. He says, "V'nachnu ma." You don't get it. You have to understand who we are. Our mitzias is bittul. Ma. My ego is bittul. My ego is ma. Ego is, my sense of self is ma. That's who I am. And you see it in Parshas Baal. It's one of those majestic psukim if I can express myself so. One of those extraordinary, majestic psukim of the Tanakh, Eldad and Medad start prophesying. And they weren't invited to the inner club. There were 70 people who were invited. And Eldad and Medad suddenly, new Nevi'im on the block. Now, in any community, when that happens, it's called a threat to the hierarchy. And you got to nip it in the bud, right? Everybody knows that. You nip it in the bud because this is serious rivalry. So Yehoshua, who's a good student, comes to Moshe and says 3 words, Adoni Moshe, Kloyim. Kloyim is from the word Kalem, which means get rid of them. So Rashi says 2 interpretations. One is arrest them, put them in prison. Ad kedei kach. This is treason. From the word kela, Beis HaKela is a prison, kela, kolui, you're confined. The second pshat in Rashi is, hatel aleim tzarchei tzibur v'heim kolim aleim. Just make them community leaders. Make them the Rosh HaKol, turn them into the leader. Don't worry, you don't have to kill them. They'll already die. The community will kill them. You have a friend, you want to reward him? Just promote him in a Jewish community. Yeah? Put him on the top. Let him take care of the dinner. Let him take care of everything. Put him on the top. Don't worry about it. He's done. Interesting Rashi. But this conclusion is this or this. Get rid of them. Moshe's response is astounding. Moshe says to Yeshua, he says, quote, Hamekane atali. You're jealous for me? You're having kanos. You're jealous, you're zealous because of me, my covet. Umi yitain kol am Hashem neviim ki yitain Hashem esruchei aleihem. Let me tell you how I look at it. My wish is, halavai, the whole nation would be prophets. Hashem would confer His Spirit on everybody. Eldad Medad, I want 4 billion prophets. I don't want 2 prophets. Umi yitain kol am Hashem neviim. I want the whole Am Hashem to be Nevi'im. Hamekane atali, you're jealous for me that people could become conduits for God. Here you see it in the profoundest sense. Moshe is the leader. And it's not that Moshe is naive. When it comes to Korach, 2 parshas later, it's a very strange phenomenon. Because here Moshe is like this ultimate humble person. There's 2 Nevi'im and Moshe says, please, Adar. I'm not afraid of another Shalosh Shudas in the shtetl. You can have another Shalosh Shudas, another Shalosh Shudas. And suddenly Korach says the same thing. Kala Eida Kulam G'dayshim. Madua Tisnasu. He almost quotes Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe said everybody should be prophets. Korach said everybody's prophets. Rashi says everybody heard Mipi Agvura Noichi and Lo Yilecha. Korach said that. Kala Eida Kulam G'dayshim. Who made you Moshe the Balabas? He basically quoted Moshe 2 parshas later. And here Moshe's response is absolutely different. Now he goes out, full out. He goes out fully. Come, burn the incense, the ketores, let Hashem see who it is. And that's when he says, V'nachnu ma. What are we? But this really represents the whole Nekuda here. When Moshe spoke about Eldad and Medad, I once gave a whole shiur about this. There's a difference between power and influence. Eldad and Medad were not looking for power. Korach is looking for power. Whenever you have a nation, you're going to have a king who decides what to do, what not to do. If not, you're going to have a churban. You can't have many chefs in the kitchen. It's not going to have, you have on top of an organization 3 people and everybody deciding what to do. You have a corporation or a company like that, it's not going to work. But what do you see here, the Nekuda? The Nekuda is that Moshe Rabbeinu, it never becomes that Moshe is the one who says, I need the control here. It's never about that. Why? Because he remains in that state. But here it's not just, he's not a guy looking for power. He's a humble fellow. You have people. It's much deeper. It's kvad peh, kvad lashon. He's always the Talmud sitting at the shiur, to the point that his eye is not really present in an assertive way. His eye is in a state of Kabbalah, not Ashba. Okay. Listen, you have to have a good Rebbe for this. If not, why should you sit at somebody's feet, waste your time? If you're feeling you're wasting your time, it's not going to work, you know? Huh? The Makabel is a mashpia, but not when he's being Makabel.
It's not at the same time. The Rebbe is not in the Talmud. Talmud is not there, then he doesn't know.
Oh, obviously the Talmud is there physically and emotionally, but he's so there that he's not there. You're glued. You're like
Physically, you're still on the
he'll. As a result of that, he'll be the mashpia. When you're listening, when you're absorbing, there's no I. You can't.
Not consciously.
Yeah, I'm talking consciously. You know, you're just like glued. You're just like listening. You're not. What? Das ist all bezach. Alles ist all bezach.
Hakt sich nicht durch. Lernst andere Sachen, es ist irgendwie hakt sich so. Was eine Sache. Ein Mensch.
Bei allen meinen Modem, es ist als ein Chative. Es ist eine Kidde.
Es ist gar nicht aufgehört.
Ja. Mrs. Lamb hat mir einmal gesagt, dat bei Etzem darf man lernen nur ein Maamer, nicht mehr. In der eine ist da alles. Elamai. Ich habe gesagt, das war mal gerade von der Biel Khan. Ich habe mal gesagt, man darf nicht lernen ein. Verstehen der ein, darf man lernen nach 1000. Aber das ist dann ein Kunde. Es ist alles in ein. Es ist alles dort und da. Es ist alles dort und da in ein Maamer. Zu verstehen, darf man lernen nach 1000. Das soll da reingehen. Aber mehr nicht. Das ist immer so weit. Weil der Etzem, geschaut der Teufel ist Bechelke, hat der Teufel ist Bekule. Rebbe noch.
Das heißt, es sind kommende Matzavim.
Ja, Avada. The Nekuda is dasselbe. It's called the DNA. When you get to the level of DNA, it's the whole goof. So du weißt doch, that in every cell is da a copy von instructions for the ganze gif. Wir kennen von der Reuk, von der Saliva. Ja, und das ist noch alles. Man weiß, was? Aber man kommt zu den Kidde Atzmes. Man nimmt ein Stückchen Fleisch, man weiß nicht. Man nimmt, could be nein. Aber man kommt zu den Kidde Atzmes, ist in jeder Prat da alles. Verstehst du? In Chassidus, das ist die DNA, der Pnimi ist der Ätzem. Das ist da alles. Ein Wort hast du alles. Was ist achtes Abschütte. It's indivisible, huh? The whole Bri and the whole Torah. Yeah. There's a Brisa Masechta Sanhedrin, a very fascinating Brisa Tosefta, that if a Chacham is teaching and two Talmidim come, and they ask a question. One asks about what he's learning. Let's say learning Hilchas Pesach. Yes, the other one starts asking about Karbonis. So he says, you first answer the person who's asking Ke'inyan, the topic, and then you can go to the other person. There has to be a system. That's what Rebbe Meir says. Chachamim say no. You can go to the other one first. Why? Kol ha-Torah inyan echad. This is in Sanhedrin, a Brisa. The Rebbe would always say this. I heard it from probably 100 times. Kol ha-Torah inyan echad. What's called Torah inyan echad? If you get to the DNA, it's ein inyan. The Spashtus is anders, but it's ein nekuda. Yeah. Yeah, Rabbi Yosef Karo, yeah. It says also the same thing by him. It says that the same thing Beis Yosef wanted to die al Kiddush Hashem. And because of some sin he did, whatever it is, you know, sins, whatever, relative to their level. So it was taken away from him. So what happened instead? He became the author of the Shulchan Aruch. It says in the Beis Yosef, he writes in a sefer, he was hoping to die al Kiddush Hashem. That was his hope, and it was taken away from him. What was his punishment? He became the author of the Shulchan Aruch, one of the most important works in Jewish history till today. Not one of the most important. The whole Jewish world follows the Shulchan Aruch. You can't be a Jew without the Shulchan Aruch. You can't live like a Jew. Same thing. If he would have got killed al Kiddush Hashem, few people would know. Maybe it would be a story. But that's it. Today everyone knows the Shulchan Aruch. It's the Shulchan Aruch. It's also fascinating. What's projected to others is usually a form of detachment from self. And that's painful. It's painful. Moshe doesn't want it. He doesn't want to detach from himself.
It's in a way the real humble person doesn't want to be famous.
Yeah.
The real humble person doesn't want to
Yeah.
be famous.
It's not I don't want to be famous because of the headache. It's a betrayal of everything. Like what? I'm now a performer basically. I don't want to be a performer.
So I write about.
Haroid acher hakavod, hakavod berech, berech b'meno. Kol mi sheroid acher hakavod, yeah.
Well, baby also doesn't want.
Yeah, what did they say? They say from the Simcha Binim that you see people that are running away from kavod, and the kavod doesn't chase them. So he says because they keep on turning around. You know when your kid runs away from you, but he keeps on turning around to make sure Tati is there. So he says they're running away from cover, that they keep on turning around. That the cover should be this, is that cover doesn't chase you.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.